The Very Paradox expansion for Warframe just released, and despite all these exciting reveals for it, all the info being teased that will potentially wrap up information we've been wanting for years, new gameplay, whatnot, I am surprised to find myself thinking, damn, I just don't give a shit anymore. Now, having heard that and seen the title of this video, some of you might think, well, the game must be bad, right? If it has no allure to you as a seasoned player, so why are you saying it's good? And while I understand it might be confusing, here's some food for thought. My playtime across all accounts and platforms has almost reached 10,000 hours. That is 416.6 days, or 1.14 years, meaning that the game has been running on one platform or another under my account for 1.5% of my lifespan, and that's with a generous 75-year estimate. There is no feasible way in hell that anyone gets to call a game that took that much of their time bad. Not that it stops people, of course. It honestly reminds me of a tweet back in the day where they showed a Steam review done at 8,000 hours talking about how bad the game was. But the guy had 12,000 hours on file, meaning he wrote the review and then proceeded to play for another 4,000 hours. Obviously, yes, I am done with the game. But that's really not such a bad thing, nor does it mean that the game is unplayable for someone wanting to get into it today. And with that in mind, I wanted to do something different, because all too often when someone is doing what I'm doing right now, it typically goes somewhere along the lines of... What is up, guys? Coming at ya, quitting Warframe for the 7th time this year, even though we all know I'm going to be back with the next major content release, singing its praises. And I hate saying that, because you know all the people making these videos have untold thousands of hours sunk into it, and I think they just have a hard time reconciling with that. Something I rarely see, however, is an amicable departure done with the understanding that not everything has to be perfect. Not everything has to last, least of all one person's experience with a live service video game. Warframe has done its job, and any game that manages to keep me for that long has hit it out of the park, and I want to talk about how I believe it did so. Review Warframe and what aspects of it make it such a great game, and maybe touch on some of the not so great aspects as well. Because it wouldn't be fair to talk about what got me into the game without talking about what makes it suck. When it comes to the better aspects of this free-to-play MMO though, after discussing them with friends and even people I've never spoken to before, the undeniable king is movement. Space Ninjas has been the coin descriptor for Warframe since its release, and given that, it makes sense that movement would be a pretty important part of the game. It's actually become such a defining aspect of it that I can't help but compare another game's movement to Warframe's whenever I start one. I can't bullet jump, this is hell. Movement in Warframe consists of the 10 following options: walking, sprinting, sliding, rolling, jumping, double jumping, bullet jumping, wall latching, and aim gliding. Hearing that many options, you're probably thinking, wow, that kind of sounds like a shitfest, and I'm not sure how that plays out. But they chain together flawlessly. Maybe you just eviscerated the bowels of your mortal enemy and you want to jump up a wall before launching yourself over 100 meters, because why the fuck not? Want to jump around a corner and bullet jump into an alcove you wouldn't have been able to otherwise reach? You can do that kind of stuff. Some missions become unspoken competitions between the randoms you were matchmade with, just to see who can complete the objective and fly through to the extraction point first. Lately, there's been some really weird debates on Twitter about games that have good movement, and maybe I'm missing something, because all the clips people show in these arguments just look like crack-addled children mashing their keyboard. It doesn't seem so much like good movement to me as it does just excuses to have players seize in the most extraneous ways possible. Whereas with Warframe, if there were ever a way players would want their character to move, there exists a way to do it. It is by far and away the greatest QOL I've ever had in a game. Because of this, Space Ninjas is an apt description, because you feel every bit the part as you cruise through tile sets in any which way you'd like. If there were one bit of movement to embody why it all feels so fucking good, it'd be bullet jumping. And this is where I'll start to tie into my next point: developer outreach. Bullet jumping was not initially part of the game, nor was it something that the devs would have ever normally considered adding. Back in the day, there was a movement tech players came to exploit called coptering. Now, I personally don't have any OG footage of coptering, and I'm not going to steal it from someone else, but the best thing I can compare it to is sword skating in Destiny, and for those who have no clue what that is, it's basically taking advantage of the momentum caused in an attack animation and canceling the attack midway by using another action that can translate and retain that momentum, resulting in the following. Digital extremes, when presented with what by all means should have been considered an exploit, instead of acting to squash the movement tech that the players loved, they thought maybe they're onto something, and acted to implement it, giving birth to bullet jumping. While it might be tempting to chalk this up as a cool but isolated incident, it's not even close. DE has their ear to the ground in ways I never would have expected. Hell, I made content for one of the most niche parts of the game possible: base customization. One day I reached out to one of the devs via the game's forum DM feature. I didn't expect a reply nor the time of day from them, but I got a reply, my concerns addressed, and I even got to help give feedback on and test content specific to my request before release for a very long time after that. I didn't even bring people to play the base game with my content. Rather, I told them about the intricacies of one of the most pointless parts of the game. And I'm not the only person they've done this to. It doesn't matter if it's a niche in the game or one of the most dominant sections of it. They will actually listen to you and often make changes where possible. We'll cover later how Warframe is an ever-evolving amalgamation of a game, but throughout the entire 10-year run of its development, I can't think of a single time where the devs were tone-deaf to the player base. Have they always made great decisions? Of course not. But quite literally every time they don't, they're there sitting down to talk with everyone about it. This game caters to every playstyle imaginable. Want to stealthily slip through the map, assassinating key enemies to complete the mission? Maybe you want to be a bit more daring and color your character all pink and go guns blazing instead. Maybe you don't even want to look at the enemies and just snap their neck from 50 meters away. It doesn't matter what you want to do, you can do it. Even alone, as this entire game can be completed solo. In addition, all characters, weapons, and playstyles are relevant for all content. You can take what might be considered the worst weapon and character in the game, modify it in such a way that it can nuke entire maps. There's no point at which a weapon is actually outdated. If a loadout is bad, it's due to either a lack of imagination or the resources to make the build work. It feels incredibly rewarding to earn modifications that, when set properly on different weapons, allow the weapon to go from pea shooter to destroyer of worlds. It's fun to go through the solar system unlocking different characters and weapons that allow for an incredibly large variety of combat styles. Maybe you learned about a melee combo unique to a specific weapon, or you just learned that a certain weapon has a special effect that you'd want to pair with Warframe's ability and see how long you can last in an endurance mission like survival. Even on the point of mission types, there is so very much to do in this game. So much has been added over 10 years. You can test your builds in endurance missions, you can try to speedrun other times, you can try boss fights in open worlds several hundred times, you can go to space, you can play Elden Ring, you can fish, you can pet the dog, you can play Street Fighter, hell, you don't even have to play the actual game anymore. There are entire communities centered around niche aspects of the game that focus on our next point. The amount of control over customization given to the player in this game is absolutely disgusting, in that it has absolutely spoiled me. I have made my name in Warframe teaching people how to customize their guild base in ways they never would have thought possible. I even made a 30-minute video on the intricacies of fucking photo mode, of all things, and that's with all my breathing edited out. The level of customization offered in Warframe can be as simple as I made my dog pink, or as complex as I recreated different raids from Destiny 2 in our guild base, and I also exploited a rendering glitch to make imagery that shouldn't be possible. God have mercy on my soul. It is truly a struggle to view any other game's customization in a good light because of the freedom given here. Coming into the game and enjoying everything else as much as I already did, I didn't care too much about the story, and I think that would go for most players with their initial gameplay. Nothing seemed to matter, nothing was important. Then I got to and completed the second dream, and I did a complete 180, being completely invested in the story after that point. I've had so many friends that didn't care about the story and wanted spoilers on something they may have seen on the wiki, and each time I'd tell them no, finish up to X quest and we can talk about it. And every time they have thanked me for doing that. This is a near universal sentiment when it comes to Warframe storytelling, and you'll see this exact scenario played out with your own friends, threads on Reddit, YouTube videos, and more. I won't dwell too much on this point, as I'm not trying to spoil anything for potentially newer players, but the release of the second dream marked the beginning of Warframe's evolution into something more, and nobody expected it. If there were one point of pain to be had here, it's simply that there are, at times, painfully long gaps between crucial story releases, but that's it. A quick but still important note to cover, in hand with story, is the overall design for the game. The art and sound direction are incredible, and leagues beyond what you'd expect from a free-to-play MMO. I know the sound team has gotten a fair bit of recognition already, but I honestly don't think the art team gets enough praise for what it does. Unquestionably, what drove me to try Warframe for the very first time was the art. The team has consistently delivered a unique alien feeling to the game, even if it's a little too questionable. Warframe has managed to do free-to-play in an unbelievably successful way. Obviously, as a free-to-play game, it does feature a premium currency, Platinum, for whales to buy up. However, Platinum is only used on either cosmetics or character or weapon slots. which don't cost all that much, but are needed by all players in increasing amounts the more they play and unlock. Platinum purchase from the game is spent less on the game's actual offerings and more on the player-to-player market, trading for modifications that you may not have yet. It's incredible simply because they've made it so there is absolutely nothing in the game that a whale could buy that would give them an outright advantage over other players, and even if they do want to buy up a ton of items from other players, that only helps the other players. It's one of the few games I can think of where whales buying into the game actually helps the free-to-play community, as well as one of the few where the free-to-play community hardly needs any actual investment in the game in order to begin earning items worth selling. It may not sound very sustainable, but enough plat goes out of the game via official offerings being bought so it works out. The market thrives and is a pretty huge part of the game, regardless of if you go the free-to-play route or not.
So there's actually a really funny bug right now that you guys saw a second.
Are we going to show it?
I don't know if we can.
Yeah, show the bug, just for a second.
There it was. If I switch weapons.
Okay.
Overall, it's a surprisingly fun game to play with friends. Obviously, yes, any game with friends is going to be better, but having played many games with friends over the years, this one stands above, be it community events or challenges, or just dicking around doing any of the many things to do in this game. It was just too easy to have a good time. Even without friends, though, and somewhat circling back to the dev outreach point made earlier, Warframe's community is an actual riot. Devs have been streaming a primetime activity weekly on Twitch that most players only watch for the drops, or at least to start. Over time, though, you come to appreciate the absolute fuckery that ensues when community managers get in front of the camera. From dirty jokes that should never be said on air, to failing open-world boss fights in front of the entire player base, it is always a blast. The community is something that a lot of people don't care too much about when starting a game, but with Warframe, I think it is something that everyone will inevitably get pulled into, and that is a selling point for this game that is criminally underrated. Moving on to some of the considerably less appealing aspects of the game. First up, we have community. Ah yes, the duality of man. It's a given that any community is going to have a shitty side, but Warframe gets some of the most outrageous and infantile hate I have ever seen. And while speculation on my part, I believe it is because of just how helpful and responsive the devs are. Some delusional players have come to mistake high chance of response with mandatory response, thinking that just because the devs respond to a lot of players, that means they should respond to all players. I believe it's because of the family-like atmosphere that DE has tried so hard to create, that these players come to feel betrayed when the devs do not meet their fantasy standards, and it is batshit crazy the things these people will do and say. There was a point I had to make a video to tell my own niche community to shut the fuck up and grow a pair, because even I got tired of it. Again, shitty people are not unique to Warframe, but the fervor and venom with which the game gets shit on at times certainly feels like it. Grind. I don't really want to talk too much about this because it's a fucking MMO, so what did you expect? Really though, Warframe's grind is a cute, adorable kitten when compared to a true grind monster like Lost Ark. The only grind I think is truly horrendous and worth mentioning from the game are ribbon modifications, as the amount of kuva required to get a god roll takes about 1% of your life to farm. That is atrocious, and it amazes me that force stats or protection measures when rolling have not been added to the game. Beyond that though, there is no grind in Warframe worth complaining about beyond time. Crafting requirements can sometimes be off-putting, simply because a newer player might go to craft their newest Warframe, say they'll be back in 3 days, and never come back online. The game is literally in an eternal beta phase, always unfinished. This is not a joke. While each update is heavily playtested before release, you're still risking game crashes, progression stops and losses, and more that slip through the cracks. If you play content on release, you're often better off waiting a week for the wrinkles to get ironed out before committing to any major update. This isn't to say that that happens with every update, but rather to say it can and will happen to you, and is something that you need to accept if you decide to play any update upon release. That being said, at least DE is upfront about what they do instead of lying to our faces and giving us the infamous post-release apology note. Diversity. The game started out as a looter space ninja third-person shooter, running about what weren't even procedurally generated tile sets at first. Presently, however, it now offers the following: Warframes, Operator Drifter, Spaceship Simulator, Smaller Spaceship Simulator, Dark Souls Simulator, Tony Hawk Pro Skater, Mech Warrior, Open World Simulator, Open World Factions, Syndicate Factions, Fishing, Mining, Animal Preservation, open world boss fights, Archon hunts, failed seasonal models and battle passes, clans, dojo construction, research, and so much More, holy fuck. The game has diversified so much, it's less prudent to ask what the game is now, and more so to ask what it isn't at this point. This doesn't mean that the game is bad by any means, but it does mean that the game you may have liked 5 years ago is long dead, kicked to the curb, and left behind for something different. Whether you like what the game has become now is obviously going to be different for everyone, but the Warframe of now resembles nothing of the Warframe 10 years ago, let alone 5. New player experience. Given the sheer volume of shit in this game we just discussed, you can figure the new player experience is kind of not great. The obfuscation of systems and interactions that your average player will never catch on to leads to the new player experience being something like... Duviri does address some issues, but it also creates entirely new ones, as it creates, say, an expectation of maybe being able to kill a level 40 Grineer in any other part of the game with an unmodded weapon, only to be met with harsh reality when they're curb stomped by their friendly neighborhood knocks. And then that's it for things that we could think of that absolutely suck in this game. In summation, Warframe is a free-to-play MMO that has no business being as good as it is, and is easily my top game of the last decade. Should you play it? Absolutely. Is it perfect? Not quite, but close. You're obviously going to find things to be frustrated with, as you would in any MMO. Will you be any more frustrated with Warframe than you were when Melania kicked your ass to the curb? No, so go pick it up. Crossplay exists, so you have no excuse. Go get the install going. Find that weird shit on your friends list that's always playing it and let them know that you're going to start. That being said, if you are not interested in starting a game as long-running as Warframe, I do not blame you, but at the very least, keep an eye out for what Digital Extremes presents in the future. Obviously, any game studio isn't guaranteed to crank out heavy hitters with each attempt, but the love and care with which Warframe is crafted and maintained has earned in me a firm belief that all of us should try what comes next. To DE and the Warframe community, thank you. Alrighty, this is meant to be a video about dojo decoration basics. This is not meant to teach you how to decorate your room or give you any ideas. This is meant to give you the bare minimum so that you know how to even bother decorating at all. And a few of you might ask me, Vash, are you trying to explain something that takes 5 seconds to figure out on your own? And the answer is, I have encountered more people in the last month who have no ability to read than I would have thought possible.